Hi friends, I know there's been a lot of negativity in the Nintendo space of late. Ever-looming price increases, problems with third-party software sales, tariffs, game key cards. It's very easy to predict doom and gloom. Many people are getting rich from clickbaiting Nintendo's demise. They say we live in the darkness. It's not all bad, but they say there's trouble ahead. It's Nintendo, I understand. Like, every day there is sorrow. It's today, it's tomorrow, but you know what? I'm dancing instead. Because today we can pre-order Shantae Risky Revolution, and all of her previous games are on sale for a great price too. A new Game Boy Advance ROM on the Switch. It's enhanced from the GBA. Man, I love Shantae. So, I will make a Shantae podcast with the history and all of the games. Just take a seat while I'll tell you all the neat things they'll sell. I'll never give up on this tale until the new game is on sale. Happy Shantae Day, everyone! So, today, pre-orders for the physical copy of Shantae Risky Revolution went live, and I am signal boosting it here because if you want a physical copy, you've less than a month to put your order in. The digital version is launching on the 19th of this month, that's less than 2 weeks, and until launch day, every previous game in the series is half price on the Nintendo eShop, starting at only $5. Bargain. But some of you might not know Shantae, and why should you be interested? Well, in this episode we'll cover the history of the character and all of the games. I honestly feel this is an indie series that is just as iconic and important to Nintendo history as several first-party series. It's that important. So I will make this Shantae podcast. I got that timing perfect. I hope. Can you tell that I used to present live TV? This is more fun. I will forge my path to 1,000 subs. I ask you, help me survive. Please like and subscribe. Yeah, do it. So I can beat the algorithm. Maybe. And all of this AI slop. You support real artists. I spend way too long making incoming epic harmony songs, but I hope to put a smile on your face. Nice. This had better not get copyright claimed by Way Forward. I'm doing your promotion here, guys, and for free. Not even a free copy. Hashtag not sponsored. I just genuinely love this series and wanted to make this to show how happy I am about the new game finally coming out. The only problem with this epic song is they never made a proper ending for it, so I'm just going to have to awkwardly fade it out. Again, can you tell that I used to be a professional live TV presenter? Bit of radio as well. You're listening to Daily Switch 102.2, the Hot FM. We'll be right back with the new joint from Alizé, Genie, right after the news and weather with our Nelly. Keep it locked to Daily Switch 2. Daily Switch 2, 102.2, the Hot FM. Right, on with the show. Shantae, who, what, why, where, when, Crystal Ball reveals all. I don't want to bury the lead here. Shantae Advance Risky Revolution will be launching digitally on Nintendo eShop on the 19th of this month. Wow, at last. But there is also a physical release available to pre-order now. And I want to signal boost the physical pre-order because it's likely to be only available in this first print run. It's an open pre-order, so you can purchase any time between now and September the 7th, and you don't have to worry that supplies will run out, as they will manufacture as many as are ordered up until that date. But after this date, if you want to track down a physical copy, you'll have to pick it up secondhand or from scalpers on eBay, and it's very likely to cost you a pretty penny. Historically, Shantae games are very popular with collectors and tend to go up in price pretty dramatically if you don't get them while they are at retail price. This is not investment advice of any kind. I'm certainly not saying that you should scalp or hope for a big return on investment. Actually, the fact the pre-order is unlimited in number this time hopefully means that most people who want one can get one. It's not like in previous times where there was a fixed number and the website would crash and all copies would sell out in a few minutes. That literally happened to me a few times. Frustrating. Hopefully, as long as people know about it and buy now, no one will have to pay crazy money. But if you think that you are going to want a copy, prioritize buying it before the 7th of September, because after that, frankly, all bets are off. As I say, this isn't sponsored. There's no kickback for me selling copies or anything. It's just a friendly word of advice coming from a genuine, massive fan of the series, but who got into it a little bit too late and only discovered how much I love the games after the physical copies of some of them became some of the most sought-after games of all time. So now if I ever want a full physical copy of every game in the series, I will have to remortgage my house. And that's pretty tragic, because I actually rate Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, especially as one of my favourite games of all time, easily in my top 10 favourite games, and one that is a huge inspiration to me as a game dev myself, and is also single-handedly responsible for me making my own cute cartoon Metroidvania with a magical female lead. Quite different to Shantae, but she does have purple hair, and it's one of a tiny handful of games in my nearly 3 decades of reviewing games that I actually think is probably flawless. No notes. I own it digitally on multiple systems and replay it regularly, but even as a shelf collector who always prioritizes physical games, I sadly don't own a boxed Switch copy because it would cost me like $1,000, and right now I just can't justify that. Sigh. Eventually I will buy it. I basically have no choice, because the Switch is the perfect way to own and play all of the Shantae games. Every game in the series has a physical copy on the system, including this new one that's just been announced. And while, yes, it is a multi-platform franchise nowadays, I'm pretty sure you can play every single game on PS4/5, Xbox One/Series, and PC as well, of course, on Steam or GOG, I think. For me and many fans, Shantae is really a Nintendo character through and through. The first 3 or perhaps even 4 games in the series were designed for Nintendo systems purely. Game Boy Color, DSi, 3DS, and Wii U were all console exclusives at the time. And if you are wondering why they skipped from GBC to DS and there was no GBA game, well, my friends, it's a long story. Or actually, it's not, I guess. There was a Game Boy Advance game. It looked amazing. It was nearly released and then cancelled at the last minute. And that, my friends, is what you can pre-order today. Yes, a brand new Game Boy Advance game in 2025. And of course, if you play it on modern console versions, you get quality of life improvements, expansions, added features. They basically resurrected one of the games that I was most disappointed when I heard that it had been cancelled. And 22 years after its cancellation, we have a newly completed and improved, modernised version of that game, and it looks absolutely amazing. If you don't know the series, every game is really good. It has a cult following for a reason and is one of the absolute top-tier premier indie series, no question. But historically, physical copies have been scarce, and the high prices they command has made it even more infamous. But what if you've never played any of the games? Well, now is the perfect time to jump in, because every previous game in the series is available digitally on the Nintendo eShop and is currently on a 50% sale. In this video, I'll cover the history of the series, the character, the developers. I'll do a mini overview of each game along with the current prices, and then after that we will talk about the new game, where to buy it, what options are available, etc. But don't worry, even if you want to buy every single game in the series digitally, including the new one, it's only going to set you back just $75 total. That's less than one Switch 2 game for 6 of the greatest indie titles ever made, including all the DLC, all the extras, everything. It's all here. $75. Crazy. For those that already know all this stuff and don't want to hear me recapping it all, as always, I'll put timestamps in the description and pinned comment. Obviously, this is a predominantly audio podcast, but when I talk about each specific game, I will put footage of the relevant trailers, etc., so you can see which games I'm talking about. And the rest of the time, I'll put random eye candy from the trailer reveals, animations, Shantae being hot. We'll dive right into the show after I read the quick intro. And if you're a regular listener who skips the intro, before you do, please do remember to drop a like while you're in the process of doing so. It really does help me out a lot. And I'd also love it if you leave a comment too. Do you like the Shantae games? Which is your favourite? Are you as excited as I am for a new game in the series? I do read and respond to every comment, so please do drop in and say hi. Okay, super quick intro read, then on with the show. Hi everyone, welcome to Daily Switch 2, a podcast covering everything related to the Nintendo Switch 2 with at least one new episode or video uploaded per day to YouTube, Spotify, and your favourite major platforms. My name is Sam, and I've been a gamer since the 1980s. I've worked in the entertainment industry since I was a teenager, including as a games journalist, producer of gaming documentaries and shows, and I'm even programming multiple indie video games, including 4, which will be released on the Switch and hopefully Switch 2, so be sure to subscribe and follow the show for the world-exclusive news on those as they drop. However, I'm a gamer and Nintendo fan at heart, and this podcast is purely a passion project for me to talk about the stuff that interests and excites me about this new system. It's not monetized or funded by any entity. It's completely unofficial and unbiased so that I can give my full, frank, honest opinions. So if you want to support me or just find out the best places to get these free daily episodes or to join our free members area where you can talk to me and leave suggestions and take part in monthly free giveaways to win official Nintendo prizes, all links are in the bio and at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Thank you so much, and back to the episode. Now, I know this is the Daily Switch 2 podcast, and I don't usually cover too many Switch 1 games. In fact, I initially didn't plan on covering any at all, just draw a line in the sand, because otherwise there's just too much to cover. The Switch 1 basically has more games than any console in history. It was much more manageable for me to start this podcast at the launch of the Switch 2, because I knew that releases would be a bit slower, especially the big first-party titles. However, because I've been covering the recent Directs and similar events, of course, I end up reacting to both Switch 1 and Switch 2 games, and frankly there are certain titles and series that I just have to make exceptions for, and I feel every Switch 2 owner should at least know about. We've just had the Indie World Showcase, which had 2 of my most anticipated games for any system dropping. Games that I've been looking forward to for many months, maybe even years, not sure. Time flies by fast at my age. Both incredible indie pixel art retro style titles with tons of polish, variety and replay value while retaining the 80s and 90s feel. Exactly the kind of modern games that I really love to play the most, and exactly the kind of games that actually inspire me the most as an indie dev myself. That's essentially what I make and the majority of what I play too. Of course, I'm talking about UFO 50 and Mina the Hollower, both coming to Switch, and both titles that I am beyond hyped about. I previously made a list of my most anticipated Switch 2 games, but again, that was Switch 2 games, and if I'd have allowed myself to include Switch 1 titles, those would have been right at the top. Check out my live reaction video and subscribe to the full video talking about all the Indie World titles in more detail. But if you were to ask me to complete the trifecta of pixel art games that I'm most looking forward to, and which are the most inspiring to me personally as a game dev of modern retro indie style games, my top 3, well, the third title would be another one from an Indie World Showcase, but from the previous presentation. I could not be more excited for Shantae Risky Revolution. It might even be number 1, even beating out Mina and UFO 50, but all of them are exactly my kind of game. But this is a game that I have wanted to play for over a decade since I discovered its existence, and was instantly in love with it and devastated that it was cancelled literally 22 years ago. To have it magically brought back from the dead and improved and expanded upon is amazing, and I cannot wait to finally play it. And of course, I am so happy to be able to get a physical release to put on my shelf, and at a reasonable price, to sit there waiting patiently for the glorious day I one day drop the price of a small car on reuniting her with her Pirate's Cursed sister, taking her rightful place in my one day to be complete Shantae Switch collection. To very briefly go over my own personal history with the series, I got into it late, during the time I was a big Wii U player. As a retro collector, I was vaguely aware of the Game Boy Color game because it was infamous at the time as one of the most expensive titles. Even back then, a complete box copy would set you back like $1,000 easily. Pirate copies of the game were rampant, with bootleggers trying to get rich off its infamy. I had heard that there was a sequel, but it was DSiWare, digital only, and I never had a DSi, both myself and my kids going straight from the DS Lite to the 3DS. I knew the series existed, obviously, and was very well received, but I just had never really gotten around to playing the games, and I hadn't really looked into it too much other than knowing the name, and it was considered a good series. But then there was a humble bundle, which amazingly included Nintendo games, including for the Wii U. And in that bundle was the Wii U enhanced port of the third game, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. And I instantly fell in love with it. Realised that I'd been massively missing out, and went back and bought a digital copy of the second game on PC, and don't tell anyone, but I also acquired a totally legal copy of the Game Boy Color game too. At the time, there was no other way unless you were going to drop $1,000. So, when the new games, Half Genie Hero and Seven Sirens, were announced, obviously I instantly pre-ordered and made sure that I could get physical copies. Unfortunately, even though they were released later, by the time I already knew that I loved the games and I wanted them, I still missed out on the Pirate's Curse and Risky's Revenge Switch physical versions because they were very limited and literally sold out in minutes, and the website kept crashing. A very costly mistake, because I want to buy them eventually, but they are insanely expensive because of those limited quantities. But I did pick up the recent physical Switch copy of the original Shantae game. Thank you, MBG. So I now have a fully legit version of that game. And obviously, I've placed my pre-order right away for Risky Revolution 2. It's super cool to me that all the games in the series are available both physically and digitally for one console, despite it being such a long-running series. And honestly, with the quality of life improvements, it's best to play the first 3 games on modern consoles anyway, rather than the GBC, DSi, and 3DS originals, in my opinion. But we'll get on to that. However, some of you don't even know anything about the character, the series, why it's so cool, why it's so well regarded, why Shantae was one of the top requested characters for Smash and Amiibo, and even got her own Mii character costume, as Nintendo recognized the fan demand to some extent. Let's rewind backwards to find the way forward. See what I did there? For that is the developer here, WayForward. A name that many of you will know is associated with quality titles. Based in Valencia, California, and founded by Voldy Way, hence WayForward, they started out in the early 90s making educational titles and licensed kid games for consoles and PC. 8-bit consoles, 16-bit consoles, handhelds, and Windows 9X PCs. They did this as a developer for hire, hoping to finance their own original titles, and it was clear to anyone that actually played any of these games that they were a massive cut above your average edutainment slop. The first big game from them that I remember having success was Mickey's Ultimate Challenge for the SNES, Game Boy, Mega Drive / Genesis, Game Gear, and even the Master System in Brazil, which I imported and own a copy of, as I love the Master System Mickey titles. Land of Illusion is one of my favourite games ever. It's a simple kids game, Mickey's Ultimate Challenge, with multiple puzzles. Adults won't find it difficult, but there's tons of variety and excellent presentation. At the time, they made titles for licenses including Casper the Friendly Ghost, Berenstain Bears, both properties I loved as a kid, Bear in the Big Blue House, a Muppet series that my kids watched when they were little, so I'm extremely fond of, and The Land Before Time, which is someone who watched the original in the cinema and then went on to be mentored by the legend that is Don Bluth for 2 years, is a property that I will never not be completely in love with. I'm a big dinosaur fan, and Don Bluth is just a legend in my eyes. To this day, they continue to make high-quality licensed titles. In fact, in the last decade or so, they've worked on titles for Adventure Time, Marvel, Scooby-Doo, Ninja Turtles, Transformers, Goosebumps, Bakugan, Troll Hunters, and Miraculous, Porte Bonheur, Lady Magique, Lady Chance, Miraculous, Lady du Cœur, Être héroïque en cas d'urgence. It makes me smile to have a French property in that list. And actually prophetic, as the English voice actor for Miraculous Ladybug, as it's called in America, I believe, is also the voice of Shantae. And we'll get into that later. Nowadays, they are also known for making quality new games in popular retro series. Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, the River City Girls games, Advance Wars, Contra, Yars Rising, and many others. All excellent, excellent titles. But it was 3 games in 2000 and 2001 that somewhat changed their fortunes. Probably the first proper games, in inverted commas, rather than just solely educational or little kids only titles, and made many people sit up and take notice at the time. 2 games based on the animated version of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Sabrina Zapped and Sabrina Spooked, and a 3rd game also based on a young girl witch, but this time Wendy, Every Which Way, based on the character from Casper, of course. These 3 games were very similar, all on the Game Boy Color, all platform titles with cute magical girl protagonists, all incredibly ambitious for the system, fantastic sprite work, and with a Metroidvania explorative vibe, far beyond what would be expected of a licensed platformer on the Game Boy Color, especially at the time, really playable, and also really pushing the limits of the hardware, making the best use of the extra processing power that the Game Boy Color had over the original DMG Game Boy or Game Boy Pocket. If you wanted to show off what the system could actually do with the right developer, despite what you might initially assume given the licenses, these were actually really good places to start. They got a reputation of being more than worth playing, even if you had zero interest in the properties. You might see where this is going. Game Boy Color, Metroidvania, high-quality limit-pushing games with beautiful sprite art and a cute, cartoony female lead character who can perform magic. WayForward had always intended to use the money, industry connections, and experience from their licensed games to make their own original properties, and that they did. Perhaps the logical step to follow the success of Sabrina and Wendy, the next year they finally got to branch out with their own unique magical girl character, Shantae. Now, Shantae is a series created by Matt Bozon, creative director of WayForward, after asking his wife Erin Bozon to create an original character for a game that she would want to play as. In fact, Erin had come up with a unique character earlier in 1994 when she had worked as a camp counselor and met a girl called Shantae who belly danced. Erin came up with a belly dancing genie, or in fact half genie, being the daughter of a human father and genie mother, partially inspired by the TV show I Dream of Genie, an American sitcom where a human man dates a female genie and eventually they have a child. Itself very similar to another show called Bewitched, another American sitcom where a human man dates a female witch, and again later on they end up having a half human, half witch child. In both shows, the magical female adult characters are sexy archetypes with supernatural beauty and power over men, but also are very strong, independent, and empowered characters with a lot of personality and humour. Around 1994, while making those educational and licensed kids titles for the 8 and 16-bit consoles, Matt was already wanting WayForward to make original games too, and asked Erin what she would make. And she told him about the character that she had envisioned after working as that camp counselor. Matt helped to draw and then evolve the character and design over time. He's a talented artist. He studied at Cal Arts, California School of the Arts, Cal Arts, basically the home of almost all of the animators from Disney's Renaissance period, which of course included Aladdin, which was clearly inspiring to the Shantae series, and elements of the games clearly also draw from the Aladdin Genesis game from Virgin Games, which Disney did the graphics for, led by Dave Perry. Not that one from Games Master. Dave's got his do-rag, Dave's got his do-rag, Dave's got his do-rag. No, not him. Dave Perry, the guy who went on to form Shiny Entertainment, the Earthworm Jim company, and MDK and all of that. While I don't think I've seen it explicitly mentioned as an inspiration, and knowing what I do in my own career, having worked with many people who came from Cal Arts at that time, I am 100% sure that Richard Williams' magnum opus, the tragically never finished but always in development, and at some point probably hiring every great animator from the 90s, The Thief in the Cobbler, presumably played an enormous visual inspirational role too. I mean, you can see it when you look at the games. Rest in peace, Richard Williams, by the way, another legendary animator that I had the absolute privilege of briefly studying under. And like Don Bluth, both incredible talents and also incredibly lovely guys. Just the two greatest artists I've ever had the privilege of studying under. But also, like everyone at Cal Arts at that time, Bozon had been introduced to Japanese animation too, especially the work of Hayao Miyazaki, the Studio Ghibli stuff, and Shantae's visual style is a very clear mix between Western Disney and Eastern anime aesthetics. He said that Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, and Ranma One Half were big visual and thematic inspirations, and that is clear to see too. What Erin and Matt created together is for sure a melange of familiar pop culture elements, recreating a sort of idealized, somewhat steampunk vision of the Western adaptations of the Middle Eastern folk stories from 1001 Nights or Arabian Nights, as it's sometimes called. But, sorry, I'm singing a lot today, aren't I? But I'd argue that very little about Shantae feels a derivative. It walks a fine line of including enough familiar elements to feel comfortable and welcoming, whilst mixing them together in a way that's interesting, unique, satisfying, and actually pretty original. As a quick aside, by the way, last week I happened to buy a French language copy of 1001 Nights, and I've been looking into its origins. Some of the stories that we in the West consider quintessential parts of the book, like Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, the 7 Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor, were all independent stories, not actually included in the original Arabic versions, but they were added by Antoine Galland when translating them for a French audience. And then it was that French version that was subsequently translated into English. It's very cool to me that when learning French and slowly building my French library, I learn more and more about old classics every day, and even ones that I would never really have considered as being anything to do with being French. Until the book, I had no idea that the French translation was responsible for it becoming popular in Britain and America. That is really, really cool. So, bravo, Monsieur Galland. Back to Shantae. They originally started working on ideas for her character and her first original game back in 1997. Erin imagined using her belly dancing to create magic, and to use that to summon or charm animals. This was later evolved into her being actually able to transform into different animal forms with her magic, and each animal form had different abilities. And also the idea to dress her in different cute/sexy costumes to use different magic. They wanted her to have a non-magic attack too, similar in use to Aladdin's fast sword swipe in the Genesis Aladdin game. And thus, Shantae gained the ability to swish her long pointed ponytail and Simon Belmont whip her hair back and forth, whip her hair back and forth, she whips her hair back and forth, she whips her hair back and forth. Just whip it real good. They originally planned the game back around 1994 as a Super Nintendo game, but it didn't get greenlit, unfortunately, and they continued to develop the idea. By 1997, they'd started to plan a potential 3D game using the character for PlayStation or PC, but again, it never really got the chance to make it out of a very early prototype, and WayForward were extremely busy making multiple licensed games per year. But after the trifecta of the two Sabrina games and the Wendy game all being very successful, very well-received platformers for the Game Boy Color, and given that connection between witchy Samantha from Bewitched and her network TV rival in I Dream of Genie, it seemed a natural fit to make a fourth game, a spiritual successor, but swap out the cute pixel art witch for a cute pixel art Genie, and in 2002, Shantae would finally get her time to shine. So yeah, the first game in the series simply called Shantae. What needs to be said? Nowadays, it's a near-legendary title. To very briefly cover the plot, Shantae is a half-genie who lives in the kingdom of Sequinland, where the genies are the designated protectors of the towns. I'm not sure Shantae's age is ever fully confirmed, but she's presumably in her late teens or very early 20s, and is newly appointed the position of being the protective guardian over her home, the small fishing village of Scuttletown, by the local mayor, a somewhat bumbling comedic character who doesn't realise that she's only half a genie and not fully in control of her magical powers yet. Shantae lives with her adoptive uncle called Mimic, who is an inventor and is working on a prototype steam engine. However, pirates attack the village, led by Risky Boots, a sexy female pirate queen with an army of creatures called Tinkerbats, and she has a kind of magical control over them. The pirates steal the steam engine, and Uncle Mimic fearfully lets Shantae know that if Risky Boots manages to retrieve 4 elemental magic stones, the steam engine designed to power the village could instead become an unstoppable weapon. So, while she feels inequipped to even protect her own village, Shantae is now tasked with travelling the entirety of Sequinland to gather the stones first to protect the whole land from potential devastation. Along the way, she has help from various characters that become series regulars, including Bolo, a male sparring partner, Sky, her childhood friend, and Rottitops, a friendly female, slightly over-sexualized zombie that she meets and befriends. I won't give any spoilers as to how the story plays out after that, but it's all very isekai, anime, video game-esque, and not really that deep. This is a cartoon platform adventure after all. No one plays for the storyline, really, but it's all in good fun, and it plays out with a lot of humour and character, and the characters are strong enough that when you play the sequels, you will happily see the return of familiar faces. Just like the previous similar 3 Game Boy Color games from WayForward, it is an absolute showcase for the system. But as WayForward's first opportunity to make an original game based on their own character rather than an existing property, they went all out. And it's what is considered by many to be the most ambitious and impressive Game Boy Color game. As we've already said, it's a Metroidvania with excellent, well-drawn and incredibly animated for the system sprite art. And Shantae's magic abilities to learn different dances which transform her into different animal forms, so she can perform different moves to obviously open up and access new parts of the map. They're very well designed, very well executed. It plays brilliantly. The presentation is pretty much flawless for the system. The music is catchy. It even has upgraded features if you happen to play it on a Game Boy Advance. A pretty unique feature and very forward thinking. It might just be the best exclusive game on the Game Boy Color. As I said earlier, the game went on to become one of, if not the most prized and therefore expensive games on the system, and one of the most bootlegged carts too, up there with the Pokemon games on how hard it is to actually find a real copy nowadays because there are so many reproduction carts out there which are pretending to be real. But why is the game so legendarily expensive? Surely such an incredible game would be one of the best-selling games on the system. Everyone would own a copy, and nowadays they'd be 10 a penny. Well, unfortunately, despite the obvious quality, Shantae was not a success on launch. It had a very short print run, no more than 25,000 copies. We're not sure exactly how many, probably less. And it didn't sell well at all, despite the glowing reviews. The reason for this is kind of hidden in what I already said, the Game Boy Advance features. Yep, this was a Game Boy Color game, but released in 2002, a while after the Game Boy Advance had already released. This wasn't WayForward's fault, and it must have been insanely frustrating for them. What should have been the last big game for the Game Boy Color before the new console was released was delayed and delayed and delayed several times over, not because the game wasn't finished, it was, but because publishers were reluctant to buy the finished indie game for distribution. The problems were threefold. Firstly, it was a new game, a new IP, and didn't have the character recognition of Sabrina or Wendy, despite it being a spiritual successor. And presumably they also thought it wasn't quite as child-friendly because of the mildly sexy humour. Secondly, the Game Boy Advance was releasing so soon that many publishers were investing all their money in preparing for the new system instead. And thirdly, because the game was so limit-pushing, it required 4 megabytes of ROM, basically the biggest and most expensive cartridge size for the Game Boy Color. And the day-night cycle of the game required a battery backup too, also increasing the cost. So for many publishers, it was just deemed too big of a risk, despite its obvious quality. The saving grace was Capcom. The legendary developer and publisher obviously saw the quality and decided to take the risk, releasing the game and essentially saving it from being cancelled completely. Unfortunately, they only published a small amount of copies and waited until after the release of the GBA, despite it being ready long before then. And at the time, it must have felt pretty devastating to WayForward to have their big, hopeful game, the one to create an original IP, to help them make their own games and not have to rely on licenses, to have that bought by a massive publisher, but then essentially buried by what seemed like bad marketing decisions. However, having Capcom's name attached to it is actually probably responsible for why Shantae became such a legendary series in the long run. Without the Capcom name, I think many would have just ignored the game. Unlike the NES, SNES, N64 and even DMG to some extent, there aren't as many collectors and enthusiasts who try to collect a full collection of Game Boy Color games. Partially because there are so many of them, but also because a large portion are unfortunately quick and cheaply produced licensed slop. You have to dig through to find the quality titles, so people that collect for the system tend to go for more curated collections rather than buying every single game. And an unknown random platformer that didn't sell well might not have caught many people's eyes unless they happened to be in the camp that had somehow heard that the Sabrina and Wendy games, also very easy to overlook, were surprisingly good and recognized the developer. But Capcom, that's a whole other kettle of fish. Every NES or SNES collector knows that any title published by Capcom deserves a space on their list. So suddenly Shantae became a game to try and track down secondhand, especially once word then got out from the few people who did buy it just because it was a Capcom game, and the word got out that it was the very definition of a hidden gem. So while it basically failed at retail, and WayForward didn't really profit from it at the time, by the mid-2000s, the original Shantae game was a literal legend and constantly grabbing headlines for the record-breaking prices it was fetching on eBay. Each copy that would go up was more expensive than the last. Even though they made no money from these crazy second-hand sales, of course, it must have been very gratifying for WayForward, and especially Matt and Erin, to see Shantae getting the recognition that she deserved. Basically, a full decade after they had created her and tried to get a SNES game off the ground. And of course, this renewed interest in the property, spurned on by the infamy created around the gold rush of people trying to find copies, meant that a sequel could finally be considered, and Shantae now finally had franchise potential. Before we move on to the second game, I should state that nowadays, if you want to play the first Shantae game, which you definitely should if you like 8-bit platformers and the GBC aesthetic, this is basically as good as it gets, in my opinion. But the best way to play it is definitely on the modern releases, using MVG's Carbon engine from 2021. It's excellent and has extra features and quality of life improvements like save states and improved controls, the ability to switch between the Game Boy Color and GBA versions, a mini art gallery, always a good thing considering the sheer quality of the art in Shantae games, and of course it is much, much cheaper. There was a physical version of this digital re-release for modern systems, including the Switch. Unfortunately, nowadays it can be a little bit pricey too, though much cheaper than the Game Boy Color original, of course. But right now on the Nintendo eShop, you can pick it up digitally for 50% off for only $4.99. At $10, it's a bargain, but at $5, it's a no-brainer. I can recommend it without hesitation. Only 246 meg too. That's less than quarter of a gigabyte. So it's a nice fast download and it won't take up much of your system memory. Right, moving on. The second game released in the series was Shantae Risky Revolution, debuting in 2010. Now, you might be thinking that's a long time in between games, and we'll get to that. It can't be stated how much of an improvement, as you might imagine after that wait, that Risky's Revenge is over the previous game. It's not that the first Shantae was a bad game. It's an excellent game. Perhaps the best exclusive game on the Game Boy Color, like I said. But it is Game Boy Color. Risky's Revenge was a DSi game. Not even just a Nintendo DS game. The DSi was even more powerful, like the Game Boy Color was more powerful than the DMG or Pocket. And this game really makes use of the greater power compared to what they had to play with for the first game in the series. While I recommended the previous game for those that like 8-bit platformers and the GBC aesthetic, I can recommend the modern Director's Cut release of Risky's Revenge to literally anyone without hesitation. The Director's Cut was basically an enhanced PC port of the DSi game with many improvements, and this was then later ported to PS4, Xbox One, Wii U, and eventually Switch. It was great on the DSi. The Director's Cut is definitely the way to go in this day and age, though. It's just an unquestionably fantastic game. It's basically the same idea as the original, but it just ups the ante in every way you can imagine. The graphics are some of the most beautiful pixel art that you will ever see. The music is amazing. The storyline and the world and the regular returning characters are more fleshed out. If you wanted to start here and skip the first, you absolutely can do so. And this one feels more like a modern indie game rather than a strictly 8-bit retro title. The plot is very similar to the first game, with the same cast of characters to meet along the way. This time, Shantae is at an expo for relic hunters with her uncle Mimic, and he is showing off a mysterious lamp that he's found. Risky Boots and the pirates invade the expo and steal the lamp, and then Mimic reveals that if she finds 3 magic seals, the lamp will become a deadly weapon. And so, again, Shantae must go on an adventure to find the seals before Risky Boots does. It's literally exactly the same conceit, really, just swapping the stolen engine for a stolen lamp and the magic stones for magic seals. It's all just video game MacGuffins after all. It's just excuses to visit different lands and collect stuff. But as I said, the adventure is bigger. The characters, dialogue, etc. are more fleshed out, and it's just really polished and fun. Shantae herself was given a voice. It's by no means fully voice acted, but some nice voice samples are included and she sounds cute and appealing. In my opinion, they never get annoying. They were provided here by Megan Glazer, and she does a great job. I guess I should mention at this point, if you hadn't gathered by the little things I've said here and there, by the time you get to the second game, it is absolutely impossible not to notice that the graphic style and some of the humour has an underlying sexy/suggestive tone. There's a bit of fan service here and there, and it does sometimes feel like Shantae, Risky, and Rotty Tops flirt with each other quite a lot. And the higher res pixel art and especially character portraits are very cheesecake in their poses and semi-revealing nature, bikinis and sexy costumes and the like. This basically results in the game being rated an E10. So that basically tells you all you need to know. In no way are these games porn games or just full Gooner fan service. Not at all. They are perfectly child-friendly, perfectly family-friendly. There's just that kind of hyper-feminine, cute anime girl aesthetic style and the occasional slightly flirtatious jokes. To my taste, it's really nice and never vulgar or NSFW. As I said, it's rated 10E, so according to the censors, it's suitable for anyone over the age of 10. But if you are particularly put off by overtly glamorous female characters or mild flirtatious language or suggestive humour in your games, maybe this isn't the series for you. But to be honest, I only need to say this for the people listening on Spotify or other audio-only platforms. If you're on YouTube, you've already gathered all of that just from the thumbnails, let alone the video footage that's been playing. Shantae and the other female characters are designed to be sexy, yes, but in a cute and playful way. It's not vulgar or pornified in any way. There's no nudity. It's totally family-friendly. So, with the disappointing sales of the Game Boy Color game, but subsequently becoming a cult classic collector's item, was Risky's Revenge a bigger success for Shantae? Well, not really at the start. Because the first Shantae game had failed to sell well, the planned Game Boy Advance sequel, which was well underway, was unfortunately cancelled, and it looked like the series was at a dead end. No publishers were interested in publishing a new game in a failed series. WayForward wanted to try again and pitched for a DS release, but again no publisher wanted to take the risk, and this is where the DSi came in. One big difference between the DSi and the regular DS was that they introduced an online eShop where developers could sell digital games. So suddenly, WayForward could give Shantae a second game without needing to get a publisher to fund the physical copy and retail distribution. So they could just make the game and put it out there and let fans decide. Now, by one measure, it was a huge success. You ask anyone about DSi games, and it's basically the title that everyone will mention, basically the best DSiWare game ever released. But there are two problems there. One, the DSi itself was not really a huge success. The DS, and especially DS Lite, were huge sellers, but the DSi didn't do quite so well. Yes, it had some technical improvements, but there were hardly any games that supported it exclusively, and many were just put off by the fact that it removed the backwards compatibility with Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advanced games. Stupid decision. The Nintendo handhelds at the time were predominantly Pokemon machines for the majority of people still buying them. So suddenly meaning that the older games couldn't really play on the new version of the hardware, Nintendo really shot themselves in the foot. The second problem was that Shantae's biggest selling point at the time was the infamy for how valuable the physical version had become. So releasing the second game initially as digital only took away a lot of that collector's appeal. So basically, it was one of the best, if not the best selling digital games, but for a system that didn't really sell that many units and in a fan base that mostly wanted to collect physical titles. It did, though, get a second chance to sell as a digital game when WayForward re-released it on iOS with an enhanced mobile port. Obviously, way more people had iPhones and iPads and iPod Touches than DSIs specifically. This added higher resolution character art and a new magic mode, which is pretty cool. Shantae wears a different costume, kind of cute, kind of sexy, looks a bit like Princess Leia's gold bikini from Return of the Jedi, and it enhances her magic abilities but weakens her defense, making the game potentially more fun but also far more challenging. These features were also included in the Director's Cut version, which came out later. That Director's Cut also added some voice acting, unlockables, rebalancing, and other quality of life improvements, and got it released widely. First on PC, then slowly rolling out to PS4, Xbox One, Wii U, etc. As I've mentioned before, I never owned a DSi myself, so I first played it on Wii U, and I absolutely loved it. So subsequently bought a PC copy too, and eventually digitally on Switch as well. It took all the way until 2020, but again, thanks to Limited Run, we did finally get a physical version available over 10 years after the first digital release. Obviously, these are now pretty expensive on the second-hand market, but the good news is that, again, like the first game, if you want to play it on your Switch and you can't afford to buy the very expensive physical game on the second-hand market, the digital version is currently on sale on the eShop, again, for only $5. I said the first game was a no-brainer at that price, but for this game, you are basically robbing WayForward blind, because this is just so much better and so much bigger. You'll want to write to them afterwards to apologize for how much you've stolen from them by buying this for only $5. It's an incredible bargain. Again, it's less than a quarter of a gigabyte required to download, just 186 megabyte. Excellent stuff. Risky's Revenge Director's Cut is absolutely one of my favorite games, and I can recommend it. My only hesitation is to say that the third game released, Pirate's Curse, which we're just about to get on to, is even better. And if you're only going to buy and play one game, I would recommend Pirate's Curse. But if you start with Pirate's Curse, love it, and then go back and play the older games, they might feel slightly underwhelming, as they're obviously downgraded when compared to the newer game. So yeah, at this point, my recommendation would be buy Shantae, but only if you like 8-bit platformers and that Game Boy Color aesthetic with its limits to how many colors can be on screen at once, etc. If you do buy it, though, play that one first. Definitely, with no question, buy Shantae's Risky's Revenge, regardless. It totally holds up and plays like a modern indie title, and it's only a $5. But if you plan on buying the newer games, which you totally should, maybe play this one first, or second if you played the Game Boy Color one as well, so it doesn't feel like a downgrade. It really is a good place to start. If you don't fancy going all the way back to the 8-bit style, if you want to start with Risky's Revenge, you can totally do that. However, if money is really, really, really tight and you're only going to buy one game, probably skip Risky's Revenge and go for Pirate's Curse, because it's even bigger and it's even better, and that is our next game that we're covering. It was the third game released, full title, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, came out in 2014. It's by far my favourite game in the series, and actually one of my favourite games ever made. Again, as in Risky's Revenge, it takes everything from before and then just massively improves upon it. The pixel art graphics are even better. The character portraits and art style are, to me, the best that the series has ever been, though the sexiness is at peak here too, and it was subsequently toned down a little bit for the next two games, so I suppose which one you prefer will be up to you. The third game even starts with Shantae being interrupted whilst having a bath, so there is some playing up of the fan service here. But again, as I said before, there's nothing non-family friendly in my opinion, but the slight ramping up of the sexiness does up the age rating from E10 to teen. So it's no longer, according to the censors in their infinite wisdom, suitable for a 10-year-old, but it's just fine for those 13 or over. I don't know, it seems arbitrary, but there is nothing pornographic or explicit in any way here. There's implied nudity, but only implied. It's mostly just some bikinis and sexy poses. And again, the art style is just amazing. The use of color, the shading, the line work is gorgeous. To me, regardless of the sexiness, it's just peak 2D game art and 2D pixel art as well. It's just as good as it gets. It's gorgeous. The plot is a similar setup to the last two games, but with a twist. Scuttletown is attacked, but not by Risky Boots this time, but a new villain called Ammo Baron, a warmonger who has tricked the mayor into selling him the town, who even places Shantae into lockdown for trying to fight back against this decision. Risky Boots then turns up and accuses Shantae of robbing her, because her henchmen and multiple special pirate items are missing, but they both quickly realise that a dark magic is taking over, and Risky says that the evil pirate master must be trying to use the dark magic to return and take over Sequinland, which would be a disaster. So Shantae must sneak out of lockdown and go on a big adventure to find all of Risky's missing pirate items so they can work together to defeat the pirate master. Of course, the big plot difference is this time Risky is not the main villain, but her and Shantae work together. And this time there are multiple endings depending on how you play the game and if you collect all the items, etc. So the fate of Scuttletown and the outcome for Risky and Shantae's relationship actually does rely on you and gives plenty of reasons to play through the game on multiple runs. The biggest change is that, for reasons I won't get into because spoilers, for this game, Shantae no longer has her Genie powers and she can't transform, but instead, each new pirate item she collects gives her another platforming move or method of traversal, which is actually something that I prefer. I like the animal transformations in the other games, don't get me wrong, but they are only used in very specific places and circumstances, and they also take time to perform because she has to do the dances. This game is far more reliant on more skilled, traditional platforming than the previous entries. The more moves you learn, the faster and more efficient at navigating the platforms you become. And by the end of the game, you really have to be very good at knowing all of the moves and combining them in the right ways to be able to complete the last sections. It gets very, very challenging indeed, and it's all the better for it. It's excellent. And of course, from a storyline perspective, Shantae wants to get her magic powers back, so it gives you some storyline motivation to keep going to the end of the story and get the good ending too. Once you complete the game for the first time, you unlock Pirate Mode, which basically means you get to play through the entire game again, but having all your moves available from the start. So you really can try to perfect speedrunning the whole story, which is really fun and gives a lot of replay value as well. The whole map in general is much, much bigger here. There were some arbitrary memory restrictions with Risky's Revenge. Because it was a DSiWare game, download only, they had quite strict limits as to how big the games were allowed to be. They couldn't be as big as dedicated cartridge games. No such worry here. This game is enormous. And as such, you have multiple different islands to travel between and use Risky's pirate ship to navigate between them, which is really, really cool. It gives more visual variety. It makes you feel like you understand the whole kind of geography of Sequin Land a lot better. It expands the world and the existing lore. Of course, all the main characters return, but there's also some new ones added here as well who become series staples and appear in later games. The dialogue and humour is really stepped up a notch here. For me, yes, this is notably different to the last two, but in ways that make it better, as long as you don't mind the very mildly more suggestive humour. Like the previous game, there is some voice acting, and more of it this time around, but this time there is a new voice actor, Cristina Vee. Cristina Vee, some of you may know, is a prolific voice actor and also singer. She has dubbed the English versions of many anime series and video games, and as I mentioned, she's also the English voice for Miraculous Ladybug, a French series that I love, which Way Forward previously made a game for. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse is the absolute pinnacle of the series, in my opinion. It perfected everything. It's not that the later games are bad. They are actually very, very good, and I'll get to them in a few minutes. But it's just that, to me, Pirate's Curse isn't just the best Shantae game. It is, as I said, in my opinion, one of the best games of all time. It's in my top 10 games for any system. It's basically a perfect game in my books. Literally, my only complaint is I don't quite understand why such a ridiculously high-quality game only got such a tiny short-run release, making it practically impossible to own the physical copy nowadays. But thankfully, it is available digitally pretty much everywhere, and that is a very good thing because it means everyone has the opportunity to play what I consider to be an absolute masterpiece. In fact, it's something that's always puzzled me. When I look at the contemporary reviews from when it came out originally, yes, they are all positive, but it's mostly 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5, 80%, etc., rather than 9s or 10s, and frankly, I don't understand. The main complaints I see are that the map has been split between separate islands, so it's less of a traditional interconnected Metroidvania map because you have to travel between them on the pirate ship, but to me the game is so much bigger than the previous ones, and the pirate ship element makes it really cool and feels more expansive, and as I said, being on the ship and going between the islands, it makes the world feel more real. The only valid in inverted commas, complaint that I can see, is they did remove some of the fast travel options, and there is backtracking. You can't get around that. But for me, this is clearly a conscious choice. The traditional platforming mechanics here are far more emphasized in this game. As I said, by the end, you need to be really skilled at platforming, but the game does a great job of teaching you through its level design along the way and learning a move and a move and a move at a time, that by the time you get to that really difficult platforming challenge section towards the end, you are fully equipped to deal with it because you've been trained along the way. It's beautifully designed. And the extra abilities you learn over time make the traveling far more fun the more you play. So the backtracking is actually part of the challenge. It gets faster the more you expand and the more you master your moveset. So as long as you're good at playing the game, the backtracking isn't a problem. It's actually fun. It's very quick. It becomes faster and faster the more moves you learn. And it really, to me, if you're saying, oh, there's too much backtracking, to me that sounds like a skill issue. Feels like you don't fully understand how to use the moves. It feels perfectly designed and balanced to me. I don't feel that the backtracking is unnecessary. If anything, it just makes you really appreciate the scale of the world, the fun, satisfying traversal. It increases the sense of urgency, too, of having to hurry to get to the next part in time as quickly as you can. So, yeah, I don't want to say that the people complaining didn't get it. It's obviously just a matter of taste. But for me, the things that people complained about are part of what actually makes me like it more than the previous titles. And even those people who complained still gave it good reviews, 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5, 80%. You know, they didn't say it was a bad game. They just, you know, had a few tweaks that they would have given. But for me, those things that they complained about actually make it better. Your mileage may vary, of course. I'd honestly be very interested to hear in the comments whether you prefer Risky's Revenge or Pirate's Curse. But for me, Risky's is my second favourite game in the series. An easy 9 out of 10. Probably deserves a place in my top 100 favourite games. But Pirate's Curse, as I said, is in my top 10. I said in my DK Bonanza review that never in my journalistic career have I previously given a game a 10 out of 10, but that's only because I didn't play Pirate's Curse until it was in that humble bundle and therefore didn't review it professionally. If I had, it would have been my first 10 out of 10, without a question. As for the game's release, it was first released on 3DS, but a Wii U version followed just a couple of months afterwards, 2 or 3 months afterwards. It got good reviews and was the best-selling in the series up until that moment, and it finally got a true physical version at the time it was released, though sadly only for the 3DS, as the Wii U market wasn't really deemed big enough to support it at the time. Fair enough, I suppose, but it's a shame. It went on to become one of the best-selling 3DS games, presumably, at least partially, because of all the contemporary hype about Game Boy Color physical version being so pricey. People thought, oh, maybe this 3DS physical version will become pricey in the future. But nowadays, as for what to play it on, as the Wii U version released just a few months after the 3DS version, it was clearly designed with both in mind. So there's no debate of, oh, you should play it on 3DS because that was the original. No, not at all. The 3DS version is just a lower resolution version of the Wii U game. As far as I know, there's no differences other than that. And the Wii U game, being in HD, is basically the same thing that you get when you play any modern version. There's no director's cut style shenanigans here. All the modern versions are basically the same. You might have included artwork or wallpapers, etc., and the screen resolution might be higher, but as it's a pixel art game for the most part, the extra resolution makes little difference. Now I think about it, both the 3DS and Wii U technically had 2 simultaneous screens. I'm trying to remember if the second screen was ever used at all, maybe a touchscreen menu or a map that was permanently there rather than having to be brought up with the button press. But frankly, I'm afraid I don't remember. It's been many years since I played that Wii U version. All my recent replays have been on the PC or the Switch. But if there was any kind of second screen stuff, it obviously wasn't important enough for me to miss it or remember it now. Basically, what I'm saying is you need to play this game. And nowadays it's available literally everywhere. It doesn't matter which version you pick. However, to me, because it started as a Nintendo exclusive, as did the previous 2 games, to me, Shantae is just the iconic Nintendo indie character, especially for the history of their handhelds. So Nowadays, playing it on the Switch or Switch 2 just feels right, doesn't it? And as with the other games, right now it's half price again. However, this time it does make it $10 rather than $5 because it usually costs $20 rather than $10. But still, that's $10 for what is, in my opinion, one of the best games ever made. And even if you don't love it quite as much as I do, it's still insane value. This game is so much bigger than the previous ones. If you don't want to go the whole hog and buy every single game in the Shantae series, but just want to dip your toes in, for my money, you should start here. $10 is just an absolute bargain. I mean, frankly, I also think you should also pre-order the physical copy of the new game while you have a chance. But yeah, if money is tight or you don't care about physical collecting, just start here. Pirate's Curse is amazing. A slightly bigger game, download-wise, obviously, because it's a much bigger title, but this comes in at 497 megabytes, so just under half a gig. Still nothing to worry about, and frankly, that's very well optimized, as this is so much bigger, with so much more animation, so many more characters, locations, beautiful character art, etc. The fourth game released, Shantae Half Genie Hero, originally came out in 2016. It was actually a Kickstarter game and raised nearly $1 million. Wow. I'm going to spend a bit less time on this one because it has less relation to the new game that you can pre-order today, and that is what I'm predominantly focusing on for this video. The story does not continue from the previous games. It was like a soft reboot for the series, trying something quite vastly different. Different doesn't necessarily mean bad, and it is by no means a bad game. In fact, it's a good game. A solid 8 out of 10, I reckon. But as a fan of a long-running series where each game both continued the story of the last game and built upon it and improved upon both the mechanics and the graphics, it's hard not to be a little bit disappointed by it. If it was a standalone game in a different series, I would have absolutely no issue with it. It's a quality title. It just doesn't exactly feel like a Shantae game when you compare it to the previous ones. It feels like a completely different game, just with Shantae characters in the lead roles. The Metroidvania style is scrapped almost entirely for level-based platforming, so you no longer have free roam of an interconnected world. It's more like a traditional old-school platformer. Again, that's not a bad thing. I love 2D platform games. It's one of my favourite genres. But in a game that was previously so much about exploring the world, it does feel like a step back. Especially after, in the last game, you were literally in a ship traversing different islands, and it felt enormous. You are back to having full genie powers this time, and can transform into the different animals, etc. But now it's just more for navigating different platforming challenges on the various levels, rather than opening up new parts of an interconnected map. It's not bad at all, it's just drastically different. But if you like 2D platform games, which I absolutely do, this is a really good one. As always, Shantae plays really well, controls smoothly, her hair whip back and forth, back and forth, back and forth is still very satisfying to pull off. It's all good stuff, and there are some Vania-ish elements in that your transformations can be upgraded later, and once you complete the game, you have hero mode, similar to a pirate mode, where you have all your powers from the start and you can speedrun. And at the end of each run, you get a record of your time, your percentage of completion, etc. I love this kind of stuff, and I always appreciate it in a platform game. It gives you a reason to keep coming back and playing over and over again to try and improve your run. Another thing that rubbed me the wrong way at the time, though, was there was a lot of paid DLC. There were extra content packs, extra costumes, etc, etc. However, this time round, when playing the game on modern platforms like the Switch, it's called Shantae Half Genie Hero Ultimate Edition. Don't worry, there aren't multiple editions, no upcharges, etc. It's just this one. The only one you can get in the modern times is Ultimate Edition. And that version includes all of the previously released DLC within the bargain budget cost. Yes, that is the way that re-releases of old games should be. It's a massive bugbear of mine that the Switch 2 edition of Breath of the Wild is full priced but doesn't contain the DLC despite being an 8-year-old game. No such problem here. The game is a budget price release with all previous DLC included. Yes, including those fan servicey costumes that you could buy. And to be honest, the DLC is mostly good stuff. It basically allows you to replay the ending section of the game multiple times, but controlling different characters each time. And you get to see how the story is different when retold from the perspective of each different character. I actually really like that. It's very neat. There are multiple different costumes and transformations included that were previously locked behind DLC 2. Everything is here, as I said. Other than the gameplay, the next big difference is actually the one that upset me the most and a lot of fans from what I saw. They moved away from the beautiful pixel art to a HD vector-based art style for the characters and polygonal 3D backgrounds. It's still a 2D side-scrolling game, it's not at all 2.5D, but the backgrounds are in 3D. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a nice-looking game. There is nothing ostensibly wrong with the graphics. The backgrounds are well-modelled, well-lit, and the character graphics are well-drawn and animate very smoothly. It's clearly a lot of proper hand-animated frames too. Thankfully, it's not just auto-tweening and looking like a cheap Flash game. No, you can tell that a lot of effort has gone into it. The character graphics were made in part, at least, by Inti Creates, who've made some excellent games and do some excellent work. They also made Mighty No. 9 around about the same time, though, but I won't blame them for that. And this looks far nicer than that one ever did with its pizza explosions. Everything about these graphics is fine, it's good even. It's just that the first Shantae game was perhaps the most graphically impressive game on its system, pushing it to the absolute limits, and both Risky's Revenge and Pirate's Curse have some of the most beautiful pixel art that I have ever seen. I love how those games look, to the point that as a dev and pixel artist myself, I find them extremely inspiring and like a benchmark to try and aim my work towards. If I get even half as good as those graphics, I will be happy. Whereas this new art style is just okay, fine, good. I know artistic taste is entirely subjective, so there will be some people that just think, well, you can't see the pixels anymore. Look how much smoother everything is. This is HD. This is next gen. And that's entirely valid. It's just that to me, it's worse. It doesn't look like an upgrade to me, personally. And again, I want to be clear. It doesn't look bad. It's just not as good as the previous games, in my personal opinion. Shantae herself had a slight change in design, and it was a little controversial at the time. They changed her proportions a lot to make her shorter and with a bigger head. Feels a little bit like they were trying to make her less overtly sexy and a bit more cute in appearance. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in theory. I'm not about to complain that they went woke or whatever. No, not at all. In fact, there's plenty of fan service and cheesecake sexiness with certain bosses and other characters. And in the dialogue pictures, Shantae still does the very much exaggerated poses, has as much cleavage and midriff exposed as always. And the DLC includes lots of exaggerated costumes, including a literal bikini mode. It's just that with the new proportions, she definitely does look a little bit younger, so that all becomes a little bit weird, especially if you're used to the older style. Now, to be fair, I don't think they intentionally wanted her to look younger, per se. It's just a change in art style, and the proportions of all the characters are different. It's just that it can sometimes read like that if you're used to seeing them have more realistic proportions, and suddenly the sexy characters become more chibi. It can feel a little bit off, you know what I'm saying. So to people sensitive to that kind of thing, it could be an issue, and people did complain about it at the time. Personally, for me, it's not an issue. She still looks fine. She's obviously not a child, but it's something worth mentioning, as it definitely was a talking point back when it first came out. While they never acknowledged these concerns, it is notable that in the follow-up game, while keeping the vector art style graphics, they did make her a little taller and make her both look and act older again, especially in the animated portions and the dialogue poses. There was also initially a tiny bit of unnecessary controversy in that her skin colour was a little bit lighter than in previous games, but as soon as anybody pointed that out, it was instantly fixed. I think that wasn't a purposeful decision. I think that was an accident, to be honest with you. Now, this might all sound like I'm being negative, but there is actually a lot here that I like. The soundtrack, for example, is absolutely amazing. Cristina Vee returns as the voice of Shantae, but this time around she provides a sung theme tune as well, which I will never, ever get tired of. Love it. Also, on the positive side, this is definitely a fun game to replay. As I said, it gives you plenty of reasons to come back for multiple playthroughs to experience it with all those different characters, to try and beat your high scores, your run times, etc. It's a really, really good game for speedruns, and in some ways it has the appeal of a 2D Sonic platformer, and given that's one of my all-time favourite series, that is definitely no bad thing. Again, this is a good game. It's just that it feels very separate from the other games in the series, and with that reboot of both the story and the style of gameplay and the vastly different art style, this particular game just isn't as relevant to this episode that I'm making here because it's not related to the new game. At that time, this was the first game to release physically on all systems, with that first edition, without the DLCs and things, coming from our friends at Marvelous. Nowadays, the new Ultimate Editions are available on pretty much everything. I think that was Exceed rather than Limited Run that did a physical editions, but there may have been a Limited Run version as well. I'm not sure. Either way, this is by far the easiest game in the series to get a physical copy of at a reasonable price. It's definitely the one that is cheapest to pick up physically. For the eShop sale, it's usually priced at $30, so with the 50% off, currently it's $15. For me, that is a very good price for a very good game. It's definitely worth it. However, when you could get both Pirate's Curse and Risky's Revenge together for the same price, in my opinion, those are the better games and bigger adventures. There's also far more space hungry too, 2.8 gigabyte, which is more than 5 times bigger than Pirate's Curse. It's still not bad, though. If you want a fresh take on the Shantae characters and world and like high-quality 2D platform games, this is still a very, very good pick. Even if it is my least favourite in the series, that's not really an insult because every game in the series is good. The 5th game released, and the newest game canonically, is Shantae and the Seven Sirens. It was originally an Apple Arcade exclusive in 2019, but don't let that put you off, because it then had a full console release in 2020. In many games, this game felt like WayForward listened to a lot of the feedback from the last title. They returned to a full Metroidvania-style game, and it feels like canonically you can choose if you want this to be a continuation of Half Genie Hero or the previous game Pirate's Curse instead. It's basically a spin-off of sorts because it's set in a completely different area. Shantae and her friends are invited to Paradise Island and then explore the sunken underwater worlds. Don't worry, by underwater, I don't mean you're constantly swimming. There are caves and structures and the like underneath the water. Again, I'm not going to really go into the plot for this one because it is basically a spin-off. It's unrelated to the new game. The magic system is a bit different this time around too. Transformations are now instant using what they call fusion magic, and the dancing is only for certain tasks that you have to do less often. For me, that is definitely a good change. I think one of the reasons that I prefer Pirate's Curse to Risky's Revenge is the new pirate abilities are instantly usable without having to stop still and do the dance. There's also a card system in this new game, with defeated enemies dropping cards, and you can equip up to 3 of them at once, with each having a different effect on your magic. There's 50 cards in total to collect and find, and of course there is replay value in trying to get them all and trying to work out which combinations that you like the most. I know that some people, myself included, can get put off by card systems in games, especially in RPGs, because the assumption is that they will be overly complicated to learn, but it's not really the case here. It's pretty simple, and it does add some depth and a feeling of progression and customization. While they've kept the new HD non-pixel graphics style for the characters, the 3D backgrounds are, thankfully, in my opinion, removed and replaced with HD hand-painted 2D backgrounds, which, in my opinion, look infinitely better than the 3D polygonal stuff. I can't really even begin to explain how much more pleasing this overall is to my eyes. Again, graphics and art in general are a matter of taste, but considering in the previous game the characters were 2D hand-drawn while the backgrounds were 3D modelled, at least this game feels more cohesive with it all being hand-drawn, hand-painted. Shantae's in-game sprite still has slightly more chibi proportions than the old games, but they have made her slightly taller and her head slightly smaller, so she doesn't look quite as unintentionally potentially childlike. And the character portraits during the dialogue leave no doubt that she is not meant to be younger. It's just an art style for the player sprite for perhaps readability while you're platforming. While I still vastly prefer the pixel art style of the first 3 games, I do feel that the balance is much better here than in Half Genie Hero, and if they insist that HD visuals are the way forward, no pun intended, I would be perfectly happy to find that future titles that may release in the future have this art style. I think it looks great. There's also a fully animated anime-style intro and some cutscenes too by Studio Trigger, no less, and they are amazing and I love them. And Cristina Vee once again knocks it out of the park with a new theme song. It's all great stuff. Another commendable improvement is that while there was a substantial downloadable content update a year after release, unlike the last game, it wasn't paid DLC, it was free. So, for me and many fans, this was a definite return to form after Half Genie Hero felt like a small misstep in the wrong direction, even if it wasn't a disastrous fumble. I don't think they needed to apologise in any way for the last game, it was still a quality product, but this one felt more like they really listened to fan feedback and took a lot of it on board, addressing many of the concerns while still keeping the parts that they felt worked. Again, this is a $30 eShop game, but currently on sale for $15. I can definitely recommend it, though I still prefer the second and third games. I'd probably place this one in third place in my list of favourites, and I'm sure some people will actually prefer the more modern graphical style. They're wrong, but that's their choice. I'm kidding, it's fine. Like what you like. And I love the animated cutscenes here. They are gorgeous and make me want a whole animated movie, please. This one is only 2.1 gigabyte, which is nearly a third smaller than Half Genie Hero. Extremely weird, considering this one has the fully animated video sequences and proper HD background art. It really feels like something weird went on with the optimization on Half Genie Hero compared with the other games. Oh well. So, now we are up to date, we can talk about the new game. New is very much in inverted commas because, as I've mentioned, this is actually the planned Game Boy Advance game, finally finished and released 22 years after it was cancelled. So that's why I kept saying the second game released, the third game released, etc. Because technically this should have been the second game, releasing it before Risky's Revenge. Now, what does that mean in practice? Well, firstly, we're going back to my favourite visual style for these games, the gorgeous 16 or even 32-bit style pixel art graphics of Pirate's Curse and Risky's Revenge. Shantae's sprite herself is pretty consistent in look over Risky's Revenge, Pirate's Curse, and now Risky's Revolution, making them a trilogy of sorts. The question comes as to where the storyline happens. Of course, when they originally developed the game, it would be following on from the original, like Risky's Revenge ended up being. Shantae's voice actor here is no longer Cristina Vee from the newer games, but goes back to Megan Glaser. Using archive from the original development, these clips were the ones later used in Risky's Revenge, so it makes total sense, and I can't imagine that Cristina Vee would have been upset. This is a game that started development before she started voicing Shantae, after all. If anything, it would have been disrespectful to move Megan's work after all these years. But this is no mere find an old finished unreleased ROM and slap a release date on it. This game was clearly scrapped or more likely repurposed as Risky's Revenge, but then given this new opportunity to finally release a Game Boy game, WayForward have put a lot of work into changing, adding and improving. From looking at previews and playthroughs, this is far more advanced, no pun intended, than your typical Game Boy Advance game. And while WayForward have always pushed the limits of what's possible on older hardware, to me this screams of it has the benefit of modern tools, far more development time, and far more budget, and we've gone back and massively expanded it to make it the ultimate GBA Shantae. Now, when I say playthroughs, yes, it is possible to watch videos of people playing the entire game through from start to finish because they actually released the full game on GBA carts earlier this year. A brand new game for the GBA in 2025. You'll love to see it. But for me personally, I've not really cared about playing the first versions of Shantae on their native handheld formats, GBC, DSi, 3DS. I prefer the big screen experience of the modern console or PC versions, and I always appreciate the higher resolution for the character art, the quality of life improvements. In this case, the new console and PC versions will have the option of playing the original GBA version or a modern mode that matches the style of the director's cut of Risky's Revenge and the Wii U versions and upwards of Pirate's Curse. There's new costumes not available in the GBA versions, and they even added a new multiplayer battle mode for up to 4 players, which is a first for the series, only previously being single-player adventures, so that's kind of neat. While I think it's super cool that they released an actual honest-to-goodness GBA cart, I have been waiting to own and play it on Switch, because as I said before, to me, the series feels the most home on a Nintendo system, and I love the fact that one console will have a proper physical copy of all 6 games, and one day they will all be mine. Oh yes, they will be mine. So, while I'm avoiding spoilers entirely here for the new game, I will say that the revolution in the title is the key distinction gimmick to set this one apart from the others. It's a 2D side-scroller as usual, but you have a foreground and background plane, which you can switch between by going through doors or gates, and you can rotate that background plane around to reposition it, so that going through a gate will take you to a different part of the level. It describes these as Shantae switching between the front yard and the backyard, which I think is cute. It looks really neat, and it adds an extra puzzle element to the gameplay, making it a unique standout among the series. You know how earlier I said that as a dev myself, and Shantae, especially the Pirate's Curse, was responsible for me starting to make my own pixel art Metroidvania starring a magical girl with purple hair? Well, it's still very much under development, and while it's far from a Shantae ripoff, it's a different character and setting, I actually saw the information about the cancelled Shantae game for the GBA, and I thought that this method of going through the doors or gates to move forward or backwards into the background or foreground layer, while remaining strictly 2D and not a 2.5D game, I thought it was really neat, and a shame that the game had been cancelled, so I actually adapted that into my own game. While I didn't take the rotation aspect of changing the layer, I added my own twist on it of being able to move time forward or backwards to make similar puzzles. But when my game eventually does come out, there will be elements definitely inspired by Risky's Revolution in there. I started making that game during lockdowns in 2020, and at the time I would have never dreamed that Risky's Revolution would ever get a release. I fully intended on mentioning to people when discussing the game that this element was a tribute to the tragically cancelled game. But it's so neat to me that it's being resurrected in such a spectacular fashion. I am so happy that it is getting a full release and even a full physical version at a very affordable price without a limited number of copies. It's just the best possible outcome I could have hoped for. The revolution aspect is used in a really cool way plot-wise too. Basically, Risky Boots the pirate is back to her old tricks again of plundering the villages of Sequin Land, but she's found a groundbreaking, groundbreaking new method of actually rotating the tectonic plates to shift the positions of the island. So instead of having to spend ages travelling between different islands, she can just stay still and make the islands come to her instead. It's a very cool and silly idea that allows us to see a new take on familiar settings. For example, the foreground and background of any given level might be from what would have been 2 separate towns in previous games. The only thing that makes me sad about this release is the way that WayForward's site describes this new game as the last chapter in the Shantae saga. I hope it's not the final Shantae game ever, but if it is, what a fitting swan song. But the last chapter wording is interesting. I mentioned how Half Genie Hero was a somewhat misguided attempt at a soft reboot, changing the story completely, and Seven Sirens could be considered a spin-off. The real Shantae story, in inverted commas, basically is Shantae, then Risky's Revenge, then Pirate's Curse, and the other 2 games are related but not really part of the storyline and continuity. And that totally makes sense. Pirate's Curse, as I mentioned, has several different endings, so it would be difficult to canonically continue from there. It's also the absolute pinnacle of the classic series, as good as the gaming, pixel art and character art styles ever got, in my opinion, so it kind of makes sense for it to be the end of that trilogy, so to speak. But Risky's Revolution was always meant to be part of that series too. Originally, it would have been the second game in the continuity, but as I said, WayForward have clearly gone back and added and updated a lot from their original work, so describing it as the final chapter makes me wonder if now it canonically happens after Pirate's Curse, or maybe even after Seven Sirens, and ties up some loose ends to make that game and maybe Half Genie Hero feel more part of the same storyline too? I don't know. I'm really interested in seeing how it all plays out. Yes, I could just watch playthroughs of people playing the GBA version already out to find out, but no, I want to wait and play it for myself. I did sneak a look because I'm hyped and super curious, obviously, but I just randomly flicked around to get the idea of the size, the variety, the sprite work, etc. I didn't read anything related to plot, so no spoilers in the comments, please. So, on to where to buy the game. The digital version is live on the eShop now. You can't pre-order it, but it shows the release date as the 19th of the month at just $25. For a brand new game at this level of quality, that is a bargain. Interestingly, it's $5 cheaper than the MSRP of Half Genie Hero Ultimate and Seven Sirens, which are both $30, and it's $5 more than Pirate's Curse at $20, though reduced to $15 and $10 each respectively if you buy them before the sale ends, as I said. Like Pirate's Curse, it's rated T for teens, so it's probably a similar level of suggestive humour and sexy cheesecake posing. It takes up 503 megabytes, so basically half a gig, no worries. But as we've discussed, with Shantae, often the smart money is on picking up the physical version while you can get them at a reasonable price. Pre-orders are live now with no limit to how many copies. They won't sell out if you don't buy immediately right now. However, they do close the open pre-order on September the 7th, so you must buy it before then, or else you'll probably have to risk eBay scalpers. So that's what's motivated me to make this episode now, to give you all a heads up rather than wait for the review, by which time pre-orders will be over, as will the sale. One of Shantae's animal transformations is an elephant, and I guess we should mention the elephant in the room. See what I did there? The physical version is from Limited Run Games. Now, I want to be clear, this video is in no way sponsored by Limited Run. They do sponsor YouTubers, that's not what's happening here. Nor is it sponsored by WayForward or anyone else. I have no financial stake in making this video whatsoever. I'm not even getting a free review copy or anything like that. I just want to signal boost the game because it's a game that I am super hyped about in a series that I genuinely love. Now, I know that for some people, Limited Run is a slightly controversial company, mostly because some games they've previously taken pre-orders for have taken a long time to come out with delays, and there have been some controversies with specific titles. For example, I remember a 3DO game that came on a CDR rather than a pressed disc, which people felt should have been made clear. However, for me, as both a collector of indie and retro titles and a developer of small indie games myself, I'm very glad that Limited Run exists and grateful for what they have done and continue to do for the industry. There are now nearly 300 games that would have never got physical copies without them, not to mention all the other small print run companies that started to appear after they showed the way. Honestly, without them, there might not have been the thriving indie game and small print run collectors market, which made the Switch such an incredible system to collect for. And in recent times, they've really been going above and beyond in not just putting out physical copies of existing digital games, but actually bringing back cancelled games or allowing devs to make new, improved versions of their old titles, or partially funding games that are half finished. I am sure that WayForward wouldn't have gone back and finished Risky Revolution without Limited Run's backing and support. So I am very, very grateful. Sure, they aren't a perfect company, I wouldn't claim otherwise, but they should be absolutely commended for what they have done here in this case. And with this release, they are doing it right, in my opinion. As I mentioned, there is no limit on the open pre-order, so no scrambling around trying to order and missing out because they all sell out in minutes or the website crashes like what happened to me with some of the previous games. This way, everyone that wants a copy can get one at a normal retail price. There are more expensive editions and extra merch available, which I will get to, but what's important to note is that the more expensive versions do not contain extra game content. This is not like the recent Sega, EA, 2K, etc. Switch games where they are deluxe versions, ultimate versions, etc. And if you want the whole game, you have to pay over $100. No, even the cheapest version is the full best version of the game. The more expensive versions just add more merch and stuff. It's pretty simple, but there is a small confusing discrepancy between the wording between the digital and physical versions, i.e. how WayForward are describing the digital versions and how Limited Run are describing the physical versions. So that's what I'm letting you know here. It's important to be clear on it. The digital version of the game is $25, as I mentioned, but there will be DLC available for that digital version, a costume pack with 3 alternate costumes for Shantae, which give her slightly different magic stats. They look cute and fun. No price has been given for this DLC yet, but the WayForward site does mention that there will be a deluxe version that includes the DLC. Again, I'm talking about digital for the deluxe version. As for physical, the cheapest version, which don't forget includes everything. The more expensive versions are exactly the same game content, just with extra merch. The cheapest version physically costs just $35. On the Limited Run website, this is called the Standard Edition because it's the cheapest one without the extra stuff. But it includes the deluxe version of the game on the cartridge, i.e. the DLC is on the cart. There is no physical version without the DLC. Thank you. On this channel, I often rant about how I hate when physical copies don't include DLC, especially if it's day one DLC. Again, we don't know the price of the DLC or deluxe versions if you're buying digitally yet. Presumably we'll find out soon, but I would assume that the DLC will be $10 and the deluxe version will be $35 to match the price of the physical version. So, for $35, you get a lovely physical boxed copy of the game for Switch, or if you prefer, PS4, PS5, Xbox, PC. As always with the Shantae games, the box art is gorgeous, and it will look beautiful if you want to display it, darling. That version contains, as I said, the deluxe version, all of the DLC. But Limited Run is slightly confusingly labeling this physical copy of the deluxe version as the standard edition. This is the one that I'm ordering. I imagine this is the one that most people will order. It is a great price for a great game, and the Switch box will match all of the Switch boxes of all the other titles nicely on the shelf. I honestly think that the way both WayForward and Limited Run are handling this release is commendable. Great price, no price gouging. $35 is more than fair. Everything on the cart, awesome. As for concerns about when the physical copies will arrive, yes, there have been problems with some previous games from Limited Run arriving very late. But in the case of this game, they're saying that the estimated shipping date is January 6th to January 20th next year. Frankly, I think this is reasonable, given that it is an open pre-order and they're only making as many copies that are ordered, so there would be no way for them to manufacture in advance. No pun intended. The question becomes, will I be able to wait until January in order to play my physical copy, or will I double dip and buy the digital copy to play in the meantime? I am super hype. But we've already waited 22 years for this game to release. What's 4 more months? I don't know. I guess wait and see. If a review pops up on this channel before January, it's because I caved in and bought it digitally while I wait for my physical copy. So that's probably all that most of you need to know. If it's only the game itself that you care about, the maximum that you need to spend for everything is $35. And if you want to catch up and play every previous game on the eShop, if you buy them all right now, the first Shantae and Risky's Revenge Director's Cut are just $5 each. Pirate's Curse, my favourite and probably the fan favourite in the series, is just $10, and Half Genie Hero Ultimate Edition and Seven Sirens, the newest game, are both just $15 each. So you could buy the best, most complete versions of all previous games for just $50, and then $35 for your pre-order of the deluxe edition physically. Frankly, for $85 or just $75 if you go for the digital standard version, that's 6 incredible games, a complete series, and every single one of them is more than worth playing. In these days of Nintendo releasing 3 games in a row for $80 each, where I found them difficult to recommend at that price point, though I'm still holding out hope that I can give a glowing endorsement to Kirby, $75 to $85 for 6 games of this quality with this amount of polish, playtime, and replay value is simply incredible. But even if you aren't fully sold, I'd personally say that you should at the very least buy Pirate's Curse for $10 and pre-order the physical copy of Risky's Revolution, the new one, while you have the chance and before it becomes only available on the collector's market. Don't feed the scalpers. But some of you will be wondering about the more expensive options that I mentioned, so let's just run through it quickly. There is a classic edition, in inverted commas, which is $65. That's $30 more than the standard edition. It contains the standard edition, obviously, but it also includes a larger holofoil box that looks a bit like a giant GBA box, and contains a soundtrack CD and a steelbook. The cardboard box has the same art as the standard edition, the CD cover art is the same too, and the steelbook is just a simple design of Shantae by herself. Personally, I don't think that any of this extra stuff justifies that extra cost, especially with the large box. I would have hoped for more inside of it. At least an art book, some stickers, a keyring. Add a plushie or a minifigure and I would have absolutely dropped the extra $30 without question, but for me, I don't know, it's a little steep, although not completely overpriced or anything. At $65, it's still much cheaper than the average third-party Switch 2 game is nowadays. It's just that, to me, the $35 standard edition is much more tempting, as it is just only the physical game that I care about out of all of this stuff. The soundtrack is obviously going to be good. The soundtracks are always good, but when it's just a CD and it looks like it's just in a cardboard sleeve or maybe a digipack, I don't know, there's not enough there to make it worth the extra cost to me. There's an even more expensive version, however, which is a lot more tempting to me because of what they included. It's just a pretty high price. It's called the Revolutionary Edition. It comes with the previously mentioned holobox, steelbook and soundtrack CD, but also 6 art prints, a metal keyring that looks like a GBA card, that's kind of cool, 50 trading cards, each with different character art, I do like the look of those, a Shantae pixel art light, which is really neat, I'd love that on my game shelves, and a super cute plushie of the Squid Baron character who is completely adorable. It all comes in another, even bigger cardboard box with an individually numbered certificate of authenticity. Now, as I said, this is actually much cooler to me, although, again, I still wish there was an art book, but I guess the art prints are nice. My only issue is the price. It is $175. I don't have infinite money, and I also don't have infinite space for storing these special editions that come in enormous oversized boxes. It's not just like the kind of PC big box collecting. No, these boxes are huge. So I have to limit how many of these kind of collector's editions I buy. And the way I always think about it is, if the items included were available to purchase separately, would I want to buy them, and what would they be worth to me? Well, I would happily pay $20, maybe $25 maximum each for the plushie and the lamp. Maybe $10 for the pack of cards, perhaps $5 for the keyring. I don't really care about the rest. So, if it's including the $35 physical game as well, that's maybe max $100 that I'd realistically be willing to pay. So $175 isn't a bad price by any means, and it is a really nice package. I especially like the look of that plushie and that lamp, but I don't know, I think I can live without it for now, unless I do get a big payday between now and 7th of September, in which case, frankly, I would probably keep the plushie and the lamp and sell the rest of the extra stuff separately. Maybe I keep the cards as well. But I will say that if you are feeling flush, if the extra cost is fine to you and you have the storage space, this Revolutionary Edition does seem far better value than the Classic Edition, as it contains far more unique, cool stuff to display than that $65 edition. It's just that, again, the most important thing really is the physical copy of the game itself, and when that's only $35, spending $175 just because I kind of want the plushie and the lamp and some cards. I don't know, it's hard to justify, isn't it? There is also separate merch available for those that want it. There's a Tinkerbat design baseball cap for $32, a t-shirt for $30 to $35, depending on your size. These are pretty cool, I guess, but not unique enough designs to make me sit up and take notice at those kind of prices. There's custom card sleeves to protect your cards for $6, or a card binder for $20 to keep them organized. Honestly, this is pretty cool, and it does appeal to the kind of collector's nature of when I was young and I used to collect cards or stickers. But it does seem a little like an overpriced upsell for those already buying the $175 version that comes with the cards to go in them. So honestly, it probably should have come with that more expensive edition. This is a $20 or a $26 upsell, and I don't know. If they sold the cards separately, I would totally buy the folder at least, though. I think it looks cool. The soundtrack is available on double vinyl for $40 in black or $50 in a limited edition purple, only 500 of those being made. Shantae music, as I said, is always awesome, and of course vinyl is more collectible and also more expensive to produce than the CDs, which are included in the other editions. So sure, if you specifically collect vinyl, I can see the appeal in these. It's about standard price for a short run double vinyl. And it's nice to have the cover art so large in a way that is less cumbersome to store and display than the massive boxes of the special editions. But where they really have my attention is for just $30, there is a Risky Boots plushie. She looks the same style and size, I think, and I hope at least, as the previously released Shantae plushie that came with certain retail editions of Seven Sirens. And the $30 for a completely custom limited edition plushie with the kind of detail that you see on Risky Boots is pretty reasonable. The Squid Baron plushie that's included in the $175 issue is a lot simpler of a character with a lot less detail. Risky Boots is a humanoid character, so a lot more complicated with her costume and things. I am very, very tempted to buy her to sit next to my Shantae that I already have. While I don't think that Limited Run have managed to tempt me with the other special editions of the games, I'm not sure I'll be able to resist the upsell of a cute little Risky Boots to be friends with my Shantae and sit guarding my games. She is adorable. I haven't pre-ordered her yet, but I will almost certainly cave before the 7th of next month. So that is all that we need to cover, really. TLDR, $35 for a physical copy of the new game, but you only have until the 7th of next month, so get your pre-order in now. Obviously, I'll put the links in the description and pinned comments. These aren't affiliate links. This isn't a sponsored video. I'm just signal boosting here because I want to get the word out so people don't miss out. And if they decide they want it later, they end up having to pay more money. And for those that haven't played the previous games in the series, now really is the best time to jump in, because if you buy before the 19th of this month, all of those previous games are now half price on the eShop. Let me know in the comments what your favourite Shantae game is, if you're going to be pre-ordering this new one, and if so, which version. I'm really interested to know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and come and join our free special members area where you can chat with me, request games and topics to cover, and enter our free monthly giveaways to win official Nintendo prizes. Linktree/DailySwitch2, linktr.ee/DailySwitch2. You can even, if you want, request a free MP3 of my terrible singing there if you want. Many apologies to Virt and Cristina Vee for murdering your song. It was fun though. Later, guys. So I will make this Shantae podcast. I hope some people will hear it. I will forge my path to 1,000 subs. I ask you, help me survive. Please like and subscribe so I can beat the algorithm. And all of this AI slop, I spend way too long making these stupid songs, but I hope to put a smile on your face.